Hi, I'm Karen Santiago. I live in Ocala, Florida. I work as a psychic medium. I had my near-death experience in 1994. I was going to my allergy doctor. I had my son with me. He was 2 years old. And I went to my doctor to get my antigen injections. They basically give you what you're allergic to in little tiny doses, and you build up over time. So I went in, the nurse gave me the injection. I sat down and I was like, uh-oh. My whole arm started turning red. I walked up to the counter and said, get the doctor. Something's very wrong. And the doctor came out and swore. He was like, oh my God, holy crap, what's going on? And he ran up to me, took me into the back room and started giving me EpiPen injections. This is supposed to work, but what we figured out happened is the nurse grabbed the wrong vial. So she gave me everything I was allergic to in mass dose. So these EpiPen injections, if you've never had one, they're not pleasant. It feels like someone's taking a baseball bat to your chest, and made it even harder for me to breathe. He gave me at least 5 injections that I can remember, and he had called code blue. But here again, the nurse was confused. We were attached to the hospital. So all she had to do was open the door and say code blue. They would come in with the emergency equipment. So he waited from the time of the injection to the time he dragged me away had been 7 minutes. At that point, I was already blue and having trouble breathing at all. I kind of went like this, like I can't breathe. And I said, I've made my peace. I'm ready to go. And he was like, oh no. So he kind of pulled me over his shoulder and dragged me out the back door. We went across the parking lot and into the emergency room. And that's the last thing that I saw. Everything went black. When I arrived, the doctor who delivered my baby happened to be leaving and saw me there, and he took over. Now, my son was back at the doctor's office. Some lady was nice enough to grab him and keep him company until the emergency was taken care of. And when I arrived, my oxygen level was at 0% oxygen in my bloodstream. So at that point, I was not getting any oxygen to the brain, and the doctor considered me brain dead at that point. He gave me lots of different medications, kept trying, nothing was working. So they called time of death. They removed all the wires and tubes and wheeled me into what they call a viewing room. It's a private room so the family can come in and say goodbye. And they were just doing some touch-ups. From the time I had arrived till the time that they called time of death had been a half an hour without oxygen. So there really was no hope at that point when the doctor called time of death. I was in the room, and the first thing I remember was the nurse screaming, oh my God, she's alive. And she was telling me, please stop fighting me. And I remember feeling like she was way across the room talking to me, like she wasn't up close. And I had no control over my body. They told me I was thrashing, I was hitting them. They had to tie me down and give me a sedative to calm me down. But I didn't feel like I was connected to my body at all. When she was talking, I felt like I was miles away. So after a few minutes, I regained consciousness, and an orderly was standing over me. They had moved me back into the emergency room. And he's going, "Do you know your name? Do you know what day it is? Can you speak to me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine," you know. And he's like, "Hold on one sec." Well, but he kind of helped me get dressed and presentable. And there was probably about 50 doctors, nurses, hospital staff. You know, the big wigs of the hospital came to talk to me, a lot of surgeons and stuff. And they would look at the chart, look at me, ask me simple questions like, you know, what day is it? You know, do you know where you're at? And I was completely coherent. The doctor told me, "You realize that you were without oxygen to your brain for over a half an hour. You should not be able to talk. You shouldn't be able to move or walk or any of this." And they were all saying, you know, "I've heard of this happening, but never have seen it in person," you know. So they were all very mystified. I think my doctor that took care of me in the emergency room, when I later went back to visit him for a checkup, what he said to me has always stayed with me, because I told him, "I'm beginning to see flashes of light, like a light coming towards me and a light going around me." I didn't really talk to him much about what I saw on the other side. I tried to keep it as medical as possible. And his comment was, "Well, from a doctor's point of view, your brain was without oxygen. So therefore, maybe your brain is trying to refire and trying to make sense of the damage that had been done." But he said, as a person, he said, "This experience changed me. So I can only imagine how it must have changed you. You had a paranormal experience. I would not be surprised if you see things you cannot explain." So what I remember of my experience, now I had grown up a Christian. I had converted with my ex-husband to being a Jehovah's Witness. And Jehovah's Witnesses believe that when you die, you go to a resting place and you don't think, you don't dream, you just are gone. And then if God chooses to resurrect you, you would be resurrected to the earth. So you can imagine my surprise when suddenly I'm in this, the best way I can describe it is I felt like I was inside a little bubble. And this bubble was traveling through a wormhole in space. I could see out on both sides in front of me. I saw a bright golden light, not a white light, but a warm golden light coming towards me. At first, I thought it was a sun. It was so bright. But then as I got closer, the feeling in my body of utter acceptance, love, unconditional love, that I had never felt in my life, ever, like that. It was truly miraculous, is the only word I can use to describe it. Suddenly I found myself with two beings, one on either side of me. The one was what you would picture as an angel. It was a kind of an androgynous being. You really couldn't tell if it was male or female. It was dressed in robes and had that same golden light like coming from his body. He didn't have wings, but I knew he was an angel. On my other side, this one threw me a little bit. I have to be honest about that. It had the form of a human, but it had the face of a lion. It it reminded me a lot of the old TV show Beauty and the Beast, where Beast was, it was drawn on a beastly face on a human body. That's kind of what it looked like. Its skin was, I didn't see any clothing. I don't know if it had clothing or that was its body. It's interesting because I have seen the same image in both Egyptian and also Hindu, have gods very similar to this. So I'm wondering if maybe other people had had near-death experience and seen this angel-like being and assumed it was a god or something else. But it's definitely a higher form of angel to me. Some people said, well, maybe it was an alien. And I'm like, no, I really think it was more of a celestial being. Was never a human or lived on a planet or anything like that, but was strictly a celestial being. They were communicating telepathically. So I got the information. They were basically telling me that I was entering the spiritual world, and there would be many people like myself coming in. I also saw beings leaving the spirit world, going to what I assumed was another dimension of spirituality. Maybe this is, college to be an angel. I have no idea, but it seemed like a higher form of self. I also saw spirits. I remember them like waving their hand over the portal, and I could see into somebody else's little portal. And I saw a young child, and they were discussing his life and the opportunity that he could go back and live again. So to me, I got the impression that reincarnation was completely up to you, whether you chose to do it or not. It wasn't something that's forced on you. You have to keep living again until you get it right. And after I saw that, I remember the light getting closer and closer, and I was just ready to go. I had no thoughts of my past. And then all of a sudden I remembered my son. And I said, my son is 2 years old. My ex-husband, he is not all okay up here. He had severe emotional problems. And I said, that child cannot grow up with that man. So the next thing I remembered was hearing the nurse say, oh my God, she's alive. So that's basically what I saw on the other side. This experience changed my entire life. I wound up leaving my ex-husband and the church. I consider myself, I guess I would call myself a spiritualist. I work now as a psychic medium. I do all kinds of different types of readings and things like that, but my major focus is on criminal investigations. I've done 25 murder cases all over the world. I've worked in Sweden, I've worked in New Zealand, the United States, Canada. I've worked on some really high profile cases. And in 2 cases, I was able to give them a suspect from the information I had given them. So I really feel that this is a blessing from our grand creator, to give people some peace in this life, to know where their family members, how they died, who killed them, and also where their bodies buried. I also see that as well. It took me a long time to figure out how to use it. At first, it was just like I hung my shingle up, I opened for business, and spirits would just come. I'd be in my house and I'd turn around and there'd be someone standing there going, and I was like, I don't know what to do. The first time I saw it, I was in my house and I kept hearing somebody speak Spanish. And I know my husband speaks Spanish, so I thought maybe he was on the phone, but he said, no, I just been in here reading. I said, that is so weird. And so I walked into the living room and this man is standing in my living room screaming at me in Spanish and shaking his fist at me, Garcia, Garcia. I said, no comprende español, señor. I'm so sorry. And he threw up his hands and went, oh, and disappeared in front of me. He was so real. When I walked out there, I thought maybe he was senile, had dementia, and just opened my door and walked in. Because we had a lot of Spanish people in our neighborhood. There's a lot of Spanish people here in Florida. So I wasn't, I did not think this was a spirit. I worked with a paranormal team and with a very well-known medium called Pastor Pete. He works out of Casadega, and he kind of took me under his wing and helped me. And I'm very thankful for the early help I had, because I really didn't know, there's no instruction manual that comes with this, Let's say I'm working on a murder case. Basically what I would do is I work with the family, and I will, if they want 10 people there, I don't care. The more family there, the more the spirit is going to trust me. And I call on my spirit guides. Some of my spirit guides are mostly family, my mother, my grandmother, my Native American grandmother. They're all there to help me. And they call their spirit guides and help bring the spirit forward to me. When I see them, sometimes it looks like a photograph, like I'm literally looking at a photograph. It's so detailed. I can see every detail in their face. Then I will ask them to show me what happened. Now, I don't hear with my ears. I hear with my mind, which sounds, I know, insane, but that's basically how it works. I see them in my mind, and when they talk to me, it's being translated to me. And I also pick up all their emotions. So, if it's especially men, if a man starts crying, oh my gosh, I lose it, because I'm feeling all their emotions that they're going through. Then I will ask them, show me what happened, show me that day. And it's like I've left my place and gone into that room or wherever they were murdered. And I'm watching it through their eyes. So I see everything they see. At times this can be difficult because maybe they didn't see who killed them, and I can only see what they saw. So sometimes it's difficult. But in one case, for instance, the man came to his house and I saw him like, oh, I forgot my cigarettes, So I saw him leave and go to the corner gas station. And at the gas station, I saw him talking to some guys. And then as he was walking back home, those men drove up and shot him. So I told the lady, go down there and check their camera, see if he's on there. So they pulled up now you would think that the police would do this, but the police are so overworked. They don't have time to get to all this stuff. She went there, they pulled up the video. There he was talking to this man, and he was one of the 3 men that killed him. I even told her, I said he was shot in the side and twice in the back. He was running. And she said, well, there were 14 shots. I said, yeah, but only 3 of them hit him. And so when she called the police and gave them the video, she said, I wanted to confirm because the lady also told me he was shot 3 times. And I said, yeah, he was shot in the side and twice in the back. So even those little details they were able to confirm with the police. And now they have a suspect. They know this man was involved in his murder. So I never know what's going to be important. In another case, the woman had supposedly killed herself, and it just didn't seem right. So when I saw the crime scene, there were dishes in the sink, there was food on the table. What person cooks dinner, sets it on the table, and then goes commit suicide? It doesn't make sense. So she was able to show me certain things. Basically, she was murdered, and then it was covered over to look like she had hung herself. So those little tiny details, like the food sitting out, things like that, that may not be important to a normal reading, can be extremely important when you're doing a murder investigation. When I was a little kid, I had imaginary friends, and I look back and say, that might have been spirits that were around me and things like that. But I was living a very normal life up until this, and suddenly my whole life changed, and at first it was scary. You'd think you were alone, and then all of a sudden you would see somebody walk behind you, or you would hear a voice, or a lot of times I'd be in public and I would hear my mother yell at me. She'd go, Karen, Karen. And I'm like, what? What do you want? And she would steer me towards a person. I could tell something, and sometimes it's hard. You don't want to approach somebody and say something. But I had one lady that I kept hearing my mom going, Karen, Karen, this lady needs you. And so I walked up to her and I said, I'm so sorry, but I'm a medium, and I keep getting this feeling that you're suffering. And I said, were you just recently in the hospital? And she said, yes. And I said, well, did you lose a child? And she said, yeah. And she started crying. She said, yeah, I had a miscarriage. And I said, well, I want you to know that your family and your child, it was a girl. And she said, yes, it was a girl. And I says, well, there's an angel that's holding your baby, and I see your family with them. So your baby is waiting for you. She's in the spirit world. And so to this woman, that made her year, to know that her baby was amongst people that loved and stuff. So sometimes I have to kind of push myself, go ahead, Karen, it's going to be okay, because I don't like to ambush people, but sometimes they really need to hear something. People do change in the afterlife. They become better people. It just depends on the person, and everybody develops at their own speed. There's no like, hey, if you've been in the spirit world a year, you should be here by then. It's, I've had some people tell me they fit in perfectly. They had no problem. And then I've had other people that say, well, it's hard because you don't have a physical body anymore. The things that I loved, there is no sexuality in the spirit world. There is no food in the spirit world. So there are some things that people have to get used to. And that's why some people want to live again, and some people are perfectly happy in the spirit world. They don't want to live again. They want to stay there. People who do bad things in life, when they die, they have a fear of crossing over, because they've been told that God will punish them for the bad things that they would have done in their life. So they don't cross over, and they stay earthbound. And in doing that, they subject themselves to a world where they're in between They're not part of this world. They're not part of the afterlife. They're in this kind of limbo state. And as time goes on, they can become very aggressive, very violent, very bitter and angry.
Like, assuming I want to do a reading now, what kind of reading do you do?
Well, what I would do is I would contact your spirit guides that are in your life. And some of those spirit guides most likely is family. And they would bring other family forward. And I would just see who comes forward. Because sometimes people have messages. I was doing a reading for one lady, and her 5 generations back great grandmother. So I was like, oh my goodness, I don't usually see people come that far back. And she said, the reason why I'm here is I was gay in my time back in the 1800s, and I had to hide, and I just wanted this person to know how proud I am of them. And she was dumbfounded. She said, nobody knows I'm gay. Nobody knows, except for my girlfriend. That's the only person that knows I'm gay. So this meant so much to her that her grandmother, her great-great-great-grandmother felt she was her hero. She looked up to her. She said, man, I'm so proud of you. You stand up for, and I know how hard it is. So whenever spirits come through, there's always a reason. And I would also, and then I always leave time, if there's someone in particular they want to speak to, then I can bring that person forward as well.